Ubisoft is under attack. Their stock has plummeted to its lowest point in years. Their games are not exploding in sales, and they've made bets that simply are not paying off. But somehow, all that bad news is not the actual story. And that's because the private equity vultures are circling, and that means that the stakes for Ubisoft are truly existential. So the question is, what would you rather? Ubisoft, who do what they do right now, or an Ubisoft that follows in the footsteps of Activision? A while ago, Ubi stock had been on the up from €5 in 2012 to a height of almost 100 by 2019. 2019 was the year that shook the world because Google Stadia came out. But Ubisoft were not really having a great time. By late October, their stock had more than halved from that high. Ghost Recon Breakpoint had came out, and it shot the success of Wildlands in the back of their head. They realized their whole slate was screwed, and they delayed it massively. This, of course, meant that market belief in short-term results crumbled. But then, the industry surged because the rest of 2019 happened. People who bought the dip in 2019 nearly doubled their money with the COVID high. But of course, the market is a cruel mistress, because from then to now, Ubisoft plummeted from €85 to a mere €11.82 today. The why behind this is of course intuitive, it's simple. Siege, Brawlhalla, along with a pinch of For Honor and a massive amount of Assassin's Creed Valhalla, that's great. But since then, their big projects have not sold gargantuan amounts of copies. Not to the point where investors with diamond hands are reclaiming any of their money. If you held that Ubisoft dip, you're probably feeling anxious. Now, amid this doom, Ubisoft tried. We've given them a hard time. They are a very squishy bunch, but they do have their successes. As I said, Siege, Brawlhalla, others like Anno. Can you imagine Bobby Kotick, of all people, moving resources into a franchise like Anno? I can't, and that's the rub. Bits of Ubisoft can actually make great games, and they piss off so many people in my generation because we remember them being able to push out the boat. Assassin's Creed when it first came out, Splinter Cell, Rainbow Six Vegas, the Graw games back in the Xbox 360, or even their older PC output. There was a lot that's great there. But that's not the Ubisoft of today. The Ubisoft of today is exhausted, and the vultures are circling. Where they are now is rough. Valhalla was a massive win. Mirage was too, but only compared to its cost. There's the Crew Motorfest, which burns on. There's Anno. There's slow burns like Mario and Rabbids. And hell, there's great projects like, say, Ubisoft Montpellier bringing back Prince of Persia in its original 2D form. Load that sucker up in your Steam Deck and ask yourself, would Bobby Kotick approve of this project? The answer is obviously no. Ubisoft Montpellier are an amazing studio with amazing artists, so why not have them make Megan Thee Stallion weapon charms? So while the good can be great, it doesn't necessarily move the money needle up. The thing is, the peak Ubisoft experiences, Avatar and Star Wars Outlaws, to us, they're licensed tie-ins, but to the market, they're a way to leverage Ubisoft's production might to create new lines of business without the risk of having to make new IP, because apparently, the only people who can make a new IP Ubisoft game, well, that's Sony. Now, the trend chasing also hasn't paid off for them. Hyperscape died, Rainbow Six Extraction was not the free money that they wanted, Ghost Recon Frontlines was aborted, Roller Champions is basically stillborn Project Q, Project Who, The Division Heartland, well, that was cancelled in service of whatever's supposed to come next. Watch Dogs never turned into the modern-day Assassin's Creed that they wanted. X-Defiant is also allegedly in the ropes. So if you're Ubisoft, thank God for Just Dance. But it's Outlaws that's particularly important today. Forget your opinion, forget my opinion, it doesn't matter, because analysts believe that the game underperformed in terms of sales. And I think that's no wonder. The market is saturated with games, it's an expensive game, and it's one that will be better with updates and DLC, and if past Ubisoft AAA games are anything to go by, it'll be nearly half off by 2025. Because it turns out if you just make your games really expensive, but then always predictably make them cheap soon after, people will learn to not show up on day one. And so to the public, Ubisoft are a 7 out of 10 factory that sometimes strikes a bit of gold with Assassin's Creed and spends most of their time in the press explaining why they're delaying games and killing other games. And that is where the investors come in. Imagine you have 10 grand. You could put that into the S&P 500 or an all-world index fund and it would probably be safe. Picking your own stocks is a dangerous thing. Most actively managed funds underperform the market. Most stock picking doesn't actually work, which is pretty much the entire point of the market. If somebody finds a new efficiency before anyone else, well, then they can pick that stock and it'll go way up. It's about being early to tomorrow's trend. And that means it's about opportunity cost. Putting your money somewhere is at the cost of putting it anywhere else. So why would you ever put it in Ubisoft, even if they have a good 5-year plan? But it's not just about buying and holding. A plummeting stock that seems like it could be recovered, well, that is an opportunity to the private equity class. And that is why we have got to talk about Juraj Krupa versus Yves Guillemot. And if this is the kind of analysis that you love, you'll love what we do over at Bellular.games and the loading screen newsletter. It gives you all that you need to know, clear and simple, in context, and free from advertisements and algorithms. Plus, over there, you get all of our reports early, you get our videos ad-free, and often early as well. So you can check out our latest edition of Loading Screen at the link below. And with that said, let's talk about the fight. The odd thing about Ubisoft is it's a family business, founded by the Guillemot brothers in the year 1986. To be fair, they grew it into a titan, and they have defended their stake in that success from all sorts of attacks in the past, most notably French megacorp and once owner of Blizzard Entertainment, Vivendi. A company with 5 times their revenue as of today, they mounted a 3-year hostile takeover attempt a few years ago. It's one that the Guillemots managed to survive, but only using cash from Tencent. Now, though, it's Juraj Krupa's turn. He represents a private equity firm called AJ Investments and Partners, and he has just declared war with an open letter. This letter is scathing. It actually covers a lot of what I've told you already, and it believes fundamentally that Ubisoft should be worth 40 to 45 euro a share, not a measly 12 euro 50, which is about what it trades at. They're pretty furious over the Division and Rainbow Six mobile delays. Those are back to 2025 now, and who knows if they'll even make that. They're angry about slashed expectations for Q2 2024, but it goes deeper than that. Tencent and Ubisoft's control of 54.63% of the shares let them veto things such as private equity acquisition attempts from KRR and from Blackstone. Attempts that, according to the letter, would have allowed for the restructuring that they think Ubisoft needs. For some context on that, right? The business world has got a hard-on for Musk's takeover of Twitter. And yes, in some ways it was a shit show, but the takeaway for many is this. Twitter gutted 80 to 90% of its headcount. And yes, controversy did nuke its ad business, but that's not really the point. They see the Twitter thing as being a massive success. To them, the consequences of trimming the fat are absolutely worth the savings. Let's talk hard numbers. 17,000 staff. That's what Ubisoft has. Take 2. The Grand Theft Auto people have 11,580. You look at that and you think, Ubisoft, what the hell are you doing? How have Tencent and the Guillemots allowed it to be so goddamn inefficient? And the thing is, they do have a point. So let's investigate their plan. Simply, take Ubisoft private. That's the plan. It's a plan funded by private equity, strategic investment, or a fair price to their investors. They want to sell off all studios that don't move the needle. Kill everything. Ubisoft should only do Siege, Assassin's Creed, Far Cry, Watch Dogs, and Tom Clancy. Obliterate costs poured into experimental games, into wastes of time, they would say, like Lost Crown. And to help this plan have a chance, they're going to use European Union law that's designed to protect minority investors. They actually say that Ubisoft is too focused on its quarterly results, and because of that, they've actually lost sight of the bigger picture and where their business should go. And that's why they argue they need a big fundamental change. Here's a quote. Prince of Persia Lost Crown was okay, but not very impressive, as no one talks about the game anymore. And I hate to say it, but compared to GTA money, big franchise money, I get the point they're trying to make, you probably would too. It would never be the sort of game that could have that level of success or be talked about. So maybe there's an argument that studio could do better independent, not being tied to Ubisoft. Meanwhile, they say that all this stuff's happening, but Watch Dogs, For Honor, and things like that are sleeping despite millions of fans all over the world. That bit's their words, not mine. And that's basically their plan. Make more franchise games with less people and release them more often. And of course, that is where all-time legend of gaming, as featured in the hit movie Moneyball, Bobby Kotick enters the picture. The letter says this. Our company has extensive knowledge about the gaming industry, and we're a long-term shareholder in Activision Blizzard. And we started our Ubisoft position a couple of weeks ago, and they're still adding to it. And if you know about the sorts of drama that can happen in investing, I think you know what this looks like. So there are two sides, Guillemot and Tencent-led chaos that sometimes squeezes out a winner that may not always have a big financial impact, or pure long-term pragmatism. Kind of brutal. But even if the Gilmo's intention is good, I think we can all agree their execution has been kind of woeful. And to understand what's going on here, AJ are what's called an activist investor. So here's how those work. They analyze a business, they produce a thesis that is usually designed around efficiency and raising up the stock price or something like that to increase the core value of the asset, and in this case, while also stopping delays, releasing games sooner and at better quality. Ambitious, though I do see the point. And so has Yves Guillemot. Of the Guillemot brothers, he is Guillemot Prime, and he has spent the last 6 years preparing for this very day. Here's key context. AJ Investments were involved in a similar affair in May 2018, and they were involved in that alongside legendary and very controversial activist investor Carl Icahn. Basically, they strong-armed the board of AmTrust Financial into going private at a price that they thought was undervalued, and essentially the whole thing worked. AmTrust went private at a slightly higher price, and investors essentially got their big payday. And it's basically the same principle here. The point of a public company is to make money for shareholders by any means necessary. Ubisoft has got ample opportunity and team, etc. to do so in the form of buyout offers to get them, more stuff that they need to produce returns to shareholders, but they refuse those offers. They're not interested in slashing their company to pieces in order to jack up the profits. Maybe that's a good thing, maybe it's just that the Guillemots want control. Now, in a normal public company, shareholders can pressure the board, but the thing is, Ubisoft is not a normal company. Remember the Vivendi story? Well, there's a bit that I didn't tell you. At the time, Yves was actually losing to them 0-1, and that's because Vivendi successfully kicked the Guillemots out of Gameloft. Now, the deal with Tencent cemented their power, but that power only got stronger. You see, Tencent and the Guillemots have locked down control through partnership agreements that ensure that Tencent can only support the Guillemots and they cannot enforce change themselves. Therefore, AJ's solution is EU law that protects minority shareholders. They want to crack open the family fiefdom, slay a few peasants, sell some other peasants, and plunder what's valuable. So what do you want? Do you want the sometimes good Ubisoft that keeps a studio like Montpellier going, but also has its NFT projects, gets wooed by Web3, probably will misuse AI, that makes wild decisions but has the odd creative spark sometimes like Valiant Hearts or South Park? Or do you want full Bobby Kotick? Because if all you want is Assassin's Creed, that's what AJ want to give you. But of course not for the right reasons. For them, this is just an opportunity. It's just means to an end. And so neither option here is great. But I suppose I can trust the Guillemots' want and desire for personal control. I can trust that more than a private equity firm doing the good thing in the long run. And that's because of what they often are. Assassin's Creed Valhalla had you going around as a Viking raider wrapped in mail and furs. But today's raiders, they wear suits, they are private equity. And so there's this happening with Ubisoft, M&A activities happening with Microsoft, and of course, all the things that Sony have been doing. And to learn the crazy stuff that's going on with Bungie, that asset they bought a few years ago, check out this video next. It's quite the trip.